Good evening from London. Welcome to Piers Morgan Uncensored. 13 years ago, David Cameron, as Prime Minister, promised us this.
Today's figures show how far we have to go to reach our goal. They show that more than ever, this country needs a majority Conservative government which really aims to get net migration into the tens of thousands.
Well, Cameron went on to spectacularly lose the Brexit referendum in no small part because his opponents promised us that leaving the EU would give Britain control of its borders. But it didn't. A succession of tough-talking Conservative leaders have delivered precisely the opposite result. Theresa May replaced Cameron after promising to slash immigration with a, quote, hostile environment. Boris Johnson then promised an Australia-style point system. Rishi Sunak has made stopping the boats one of the top priorities for his government. But it's hard to remember a time when so many powerful people were so emphatically wrong about something that matters so much to the public. Today's immigration figures show net migration is at record levels. 745,000 people last year, which was way, way higher by 130-odd thousand than we were originally told. As a share of the population, more people are coming to Britain now than at any time in recorded history. And it's mostly legal. The tens of thousands of people crossing the channel in small boats is a whole different issue. But what both things expose is a government that's lost control of the borders, hasn't it? Populist leaders, both here and abroad, are filling the void that's created by telling people they should be angry about something and then not doing anything about it. Opinions like this are increasingly common as a result.
We've got that many people here and we're looking after them, but we're not looking after our own.
People really, really desperate for homes and they can't afford to live, basically. And we're giving all our money to the asylum seekers.
Well, many of the people coming to Britain legally are here for perfectly good reasons. They're students paying big fees, they're medical workers in the NHS, and God knows we need them. They're refugees from Ukraine. The real issue is leaders who scapegoat migrants as a problem while clearly having no idea how they're going to solve the problem. It should come as no surprise that angry voters are turning to right-wing populists in response. Well, I'm joined now by Talk TV contributors Esther Cracker and Paula Rowan Adrian. And first, from Tel Aviv, the author and associate editor of The Spectator, Douglas Murray. Douglas, let's start with what's going on over there with you, and then we'll come to this migration story. A big day tomorrow in this war, a pause, the release of 13 hostages, we believe women and children. What is the feeling about this? You know, many people are saying from a distance that this looks like a sort of slow form of water torture for these poor families. Drip, drip, drip of people being let out. No one knows who it is until the last minute, and so on. Agony for these families.
Yes, it's an agonizing time in Israel. Everybody in Israel would like to see the people who were kidnapped on the 7th of October return to their families, what remains of their families in many cases. And it's absolutely agonizing. Last night I was with many of the families in Tel Aviv as we were waiting to hear the news of what was meant to be an exchange, a handover of some of the kidnapped people this morning. That then didn't happen. We're now waiting for it to happen tomorrow morning. We don't know for certain it'll happen. We thought it would happen today. Now it's meant to be tomorrow. It's agonizing for the families. One mother this evening discovered that her 2 children are not on the list that has been given out to some families, telling them that their loved ones are going to be in the release tomorrow. And of course, there are many families. One I was speaking with earlier, their son was 21. He was at the rave and was abducted by Hamas, stolen with 3 of his friends. He's 21. It's only people under the age of 18 that are being focused on at the moment, but many of the families feel, you know, they want them all home. And the problem, of course, that Israel is now in is a problem that Israelis know very well, which is the completely unfair exchange of the hostages. The Israeli government is talking about releasing 3 Palestinian prisoners, that is, people who have, for instance, been sent to prison in Israel for carrying out terrorist offences, releasing 3 of these people for every 1 child that Hamas are going to release. And there's an added kick to this. Sirwan, the head of Hamas in Gaza, who was the person who planned and led the operation on the 7th of October that killed 1,400 Israelis and led to these Israelis being kidnapped, is a man who was himself released in just such a prisoner swap 10 years ago. That was when Israel released more than 1,000 people from Israeli prisons, Palestinians from Israeli prisons, and returned them for a single soldier, Gilad Shalit, who Israel, of course, wanted back. So there's a horrible kicker to all of this, a horrible kicker, that we've seen this before, these exchanges. The people being released by Israel are people who stabbed people in the streets, carried out brutal terrorist attacks. They're being returned for children.
Douglas, is there any doubt that when this hostage release few days is over, that Israel will go back to attacking Gaza to get at Hamas? There are some people who hope that perhaps if this goes successfully over the next few days, that it may lead to a more permanent ceasefire. But is there any appetite for that, do you think, in the Netanyahu government?
Well, it really is a very, very serious conundrum, this, because Hamas is carrying out what you accurately describe as water torture of the Israelis. It can drip out small numbers of the abducted Israelis, and it knows that, for them, these are golden eggs. They know how much Israel cares about every citizen who was stolen from their families. They know how much they care. They know how much they can drag out international pressure on Israel to have a ceasefire. They know that they can keep on promising releases and then let down the families again and again. The problem that Israel has is that Benjamin Netanyahu says that he wants to destroy Hamas. Most Israelis feel, I think understandably, they cannot live with Hamas. And yet, of course, as long as Hamas has some hostages, has the people who've been kidnapped, it can try to stop operations going on in the Gaza to destroy Hamas. It's an incredibly ugly equation, but it's one that Hamas has performed before, as has Islamic Jihad and other terror groups in the Gaza. They are playing a game not just regionally, but internationally. And, of course, the people who are suffering most are the families who have their loved ones in what state we don't know. A small number once again promised to be returned tomorrow. Again, what state they'll be in, we do not know. But yes, it's torture for the families.
I'm going to be talking to Norman Finkelstein in a few minutes. You've got strong opinions about him. I know you're going to stay and just listen to that interview and then react to that after, which I appreciate. Just before I go to the pack, just very quickly, if you don't mind, your reaction to these migration figures in the UK. Massively higher net migration last year than we've been led to believe. Very high again this year. This all from a Conservative government that promised to take back control of the borders and reduce net migration to tens of thousands.
Well, obviously, it's a political failure, a generational political failure that's just sped up in recent years. That it has happened, as you said, under consecutive leaders who've promised that exactly this wouldn't happen is a disaster for Britain. Quite what a disaster it is, I think we can already start to see. I remember when Giorgia Meloni was described as this far-out, far-right political leader in Italy, and she's now Prime Minister. I remember when Geert Wilders was described as this far-out, far-right political figure who wasn't even allowed into Britain in 2009 by a Labour Home Secretary. And now he's the main party leader in the Netherlands. So if anyone thinks that all of this just glides by endlessly without any political consequence, I'd just say raise your eyes a little and look to the continent.
Yeah, completely agree. Douglas, I'll talk to you a little later. Thank you very much. Yeah, Paula, I mean, there's a hard reality here. Yes. This migrant problem is not going away. It's getting worse. There are more and more people now coming across the continent trying to find somewhere to go. And you're seeing a rise of very right-wing populist leaders now winning elections as voters say, you know what, we need someone to do something about this.
Which is why we always have to be careful with the language that we use.
Right.
So you started with the word, the problem. There isn't a problem. We actually haven't...
You don't think increasing population is a problem with the state of our NHS? I had an experience of the NHS recently, right, with a family member. And it was horrific. Partly horrific and partly great. The horrific part was an A&E. Have you been to an A&E in an NHS hospital recently?
I have.
It's
I've
like
got 3 children, Piers.
It's like a war zone, right?
Yeah.
And you've got people who've just had heart attacks being left on trolleys in corridors for 6-7 hours. I know because I know who it was, right? And then you get good treatment once you get through that system. But can we take millions more people in this country? Genuine question. It's not because I don't got any objection to any individual. Can we sustain that pressure on our already creaking public services?
The reason why, so there's two different questions there. It's our creaking public services and can we take more people? The answer is we need more people. The second answer to creaking public services is we need more people because our public services are creaking. Our government, over the last 13 years, has failed to protect our public services.
I think
government, it's really important to point out. It's really important to point out because I am also worried, as Douglas Murray says, about the rise of the right. And what is happening is that we're not being told the truth about immigration. We need more people to come into this country. Our net population is only rising at 200,000 on average over the last 3 years. That's it, 200,000.
Okay. That's twice the population of Solihull.
And what we are not being told is why we are unable to cope with the fact that we've got no housing, why the fact that the NHS is crumbling, why the fact that we are going to food banks, why the fact that our schools are crumbling. That is what we need to look at.
Esther?
The thing is, over 50% of those people, those figures that you've just quoted of the 750,000, they're dependents. So they're dependents of people coming in legally, so workers that have come in. So we're talking women and children mainly, who rely on the NHS, education, all of these things. At the end of the day, we have to admit Britain
that
has...
seems to be a big part of the problem.
But that's
which
the
is
issue.
not the actual skilled workers that we need, which I think we totally can all agree on that. It's the number of people that come with them, right? Family dependents is actually a very large number of people.
The thing is, I understand your point that we need these skilled workers, but at the end of the day, they are not coming without families and dependents who rely on our public services. But also, we have to have a conversation about what Britain is willing to give up in exchange for slowing this migration. The reason why the Conservatives haven't tackled this issue is because big business likes mass migration.
Absolutely.
It has a downward effect on wages, so it keeps wages minimally low. We look at GDP figures and we somehow resemble a dynamic and growing and strong economy when that's not the case. We live in a low-wage, low-productivity economy, and that's the bigger issue. At the end of the day, under the Labour government of over 13 years of a Labour government, 3.5 million people were allowed into this country, and that was scandalous. You know, Labour is out of control. About 1 million people in just 2 years of Tory leadership,
and so
that is scandalous. That's horrifying.
No,
it is horrifying.
It's not scandalous. It's not horrifying. It's what is required.
It's completely unsustainable.
It's what is needed.
It's not what's needed.
I'm
sorry.
Let me explain to you why. If we do not continue to open our door to healthy young people who are going to be able to work.
Where are they going to live?
As an ageing population.
Where are they going to live?
Here's what I would say.
We're an ageing population.
If that's true,
we need them.
You say who called it a problem? David Cameron said it would be down to tens of thousands.
Completely unrealistic.
That's why the public believe there's a problem.
Yes.
Because they hear the Prime Minister say that, and now they're seeing nearly 1 million people come in last year.
Which is where
that's not tens of thousands.
Which is where I actually agree with Douglas Murray. And I've said many times before, this focus on the small boats was just it was a smoke screen.
Well, I think there are two different issues.
I
think illegal immigration on the small boats has got to be better controlled. It clearly is, apart from anything else, is an insult to all those who are going through the system legally. But secondly, I just don't think you can have successive prime ministers saying this is a big problem, this net migration. We're going to get it under 100,000, get it down to tens of thousands, and then you see figures like today, where last year alone 750,000.
But Piers, immigrants have always been blamed for the ills in society.
I'm not blaming immigrants.
I'm not saying you are. What I'm saying
control.
is, well, I don't think it is.
It is out of control.
I don't think it is.
It is.
And I think it will increase, and because it needs to increase.
It's out of control by the yardstick set by successive prime ministers who said we have to get it under the tens of thousands. The moment you say that repeatedly, and then you get these numbers, it looks like it's out of control. And my experience, I've got to say, of NHS recently showed me we have big problems with creaking public services. Got to leave it there. Thank you both very much indeed.